Welcome back to the Up in the Blue Seats podcast. The Rangers are rolling. It's 8 in a row. The guys are looking pretty good. Like those first 23 games we saw early in the season, the mojo is back, and we're going to see if they can take it into their matchup with the Jersey Devils tonight. We hope you're listening to this podcast to kind of hype you up, and that's what we're here for. We're here to talk about all good things, including a little bit Stadium Series talk. There was a move that was made literally just now, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some trade rumors. So appreciate you joining us. And as always, we appreciate Miss Mollie Walker from the New York Post. And of course, former Ranger great, Brian Boyle. Before we get into things here, I just have to throw this out there. Boston College this weekend, Brian. They had a
Nasty.
pretty good weekend against
They're
Mollie's
nasty.
college there.
Uh,
I don't want to start anything between the two of y'all, but not a bad weekend.
it's not even, I feel like this has happened all season. Every time I look at the score for UMass against BC or BU, it is just so incredibly one-sided. And I'm
The
like,
zoo.
oh, Greg Carvel is probably banging his head up against his office
Yeah,
wall right now. I know
they
he
had him. They had him. BC just came back. Apparently, there was some questionable officiating.
mm.
Some UMass fans weren't happy about, but look, we're just. I'm telling you, Perot is like,
Oh, yeah, he is.
hey,
Disgusting.
Perot's nasty.
He's an untouchable. If we're
Well,
gonna make it
Mm.
as it pertains to the Rangers, he is an untouchable.
the only thing I could think of is he has like a different kind of skating stride, and I from what he's done as a young player in college is very hard to do. He's
Mm.
dominant. Like he's
Hmm.
dominant. He's the best player on that line. And he was the last one to get picked out of the three. He was still a first rounder, but
Right.
um, just like I mean, he's so fun to watch. And but yeah, it's a different kind of stride a little bit. Um, but Rangers fans get excited about him.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Laviolette moments from this year was somebody asked him about Perot, which I don't know why are we asking him about
Yeah.
Perot, but like whatever. But he handled it so well and so appropriately. He was like, he's like, I don't even need to talk to our scouts. He's like, my daughter goes to BC
Yeah.
and goes to every game, and she tells me that Gabe is doing just fine.
Yeah.
doing doing just fine. It was like the perfect anecdotal answer for Laviolette. It was great.
Is he leading the nation in points?
I believe so.
Can someone check that?
I
As
believe
a
so, she says.
that's just
I believe so. I believe so. He's doing just fine. And Laviolette Jr. gave that
It's
gave that scouting report.
it's the perfect boots on the ground that you want in that
It is.
situation there. Let me tell you.
Yep.
Well, I just had to hit it off the top of the show here just because I thought it was interesting. We have a BC person and a UMass person. We'll get into some Stadium Series talk very quickly here, just because it has been a couple of days since it's happened, but we haven't been able to react to it yet. It was an extremely exciting game. The Rangers won, thankfully. I feel like it was a good microcosm of the Rangers and the Islanders season, right?
Mm.
Islanders have good
Definitely
players.
the Islanders.
Oh God, yeah. Great players can score, and they're just awful at the end, especially their
uh,
power play. And then the Rangers too, some goaltending troubles to start, but to come on really strong at the end and to win the game in very exciting fashion in front of 75,000 plus. Mollie, you were there. Brian, I know you were watching. What were your thoughts on the Stadium Series between the Rangers and Islanders?
just fans in attendance, which it was almost 80,000.
Mm.
Actually, I think it was 79,600, something like that. They could not have gotten a better game. I don't think either of the two games for the Stadium Series could have been any better. 20 goals
Yeah.
between the two games, one overtime game, a 5-minute comeback. Like it just what an unbelievable game. It couldn't have done any better. It, broke records for ESPN since they've reacquired the NHL rights, everything. And I mean, I know logistically this isn't possible probably, and it would, kind of knock the novelty of it, but man, give it to me every year. I want it every year. Let's go to Yankee Stadium, let's go to
Ooh,
City Field,
yep.
let's keep it between the four local teams. Let's mix and match. I mean, it just was so awesome, so fun, and players obviously loved it. Brian, you could speak more to how unbelievable it must be to play in those sorts of settings.
You know what? Someone suggested like kind of rip off the bean pot a little bit.
Yes.
Do it outdoors.
Yes.
I don't know who said that on
I want it.
someone from the NHL Network, because I was talking about the bean pot. Obviously, that was at the beginning of the month on NHL Network with Rupper,
Mm.
and Rupper can't figure out the bean pot, and a lot of people can't figure out the bean pot. And you know what? I don't really care because I grew up with the bean pot, and it's awesome, and it's like just Boston hockey. It's just for bragging rights. It's all it's for. It's less mid-season tournament NBA. It's more just like who's the best team right here in this
Mm.
area. And you know, I don't know how you could do it. You'd have to do it over. You have to figure out scheduling because I mean
Yeah.
that's the first time that they played the Islanders this year, which is
A
bananas
crime.
to me.
A
Yeah.
crime. An
Um,
absolute crime.
but what theater that was.
Ugh.
It's you know, just talking about it, like I said it before, it's not a playoff game, but it feels like one. It's like a dress
Mhm.
rehearsal for a playoff game because you're playing one game. It's almost like an elimination game, and
Mhm.
you have to do things. It's coached that way, as we saw with Laviolette and what he did towards the end. It's all that attention's brought to it. It's so much fun the lead up to it, and it was it was a huge success. And the Winter Classic is like the crown jewel, right? But this year, I mean, there's a couple of teams from out west. There's less people. There's less viewership for the out west
Mhm.
crowd. I'm not saying they don't love hockey just as much, but there's just less eyeballs on it. And then you get Rangers, Islanders, you get Devils, Philly. Like people are watching these. It's
Oh
great.
yeah.
It's great for the league. It's great for these guys who get a chance to do it. Um, you know, and this is maybe for a different topic or a different time, but there's so much that goes into people signing contracts now, players signing contracts in warm weather places, tax-free places, and all that. I was talking to Henrik about this actually on during the game against Dallas in between when they were playing. We weren't on the air, but I'm like, Hank, you could walk around New York City, right? And he's obviously a different level, but I go, what you got dinged in taxes here, you could go to like a Goldman Sachs meeting and speak to these people on what it takes to be successful and make $1 million if you wanted to.
Mhm.
Like the people you met here, the opportunities, the doors that it opens being a hockey player in this part of the world, in this part of the country. Yeah, you get taxed, but and it's the same goes for Canada. You can do endorsement things in Canada,
Yeah.
like all
The
these things. So
fame.
like so when they bring more attention to it, I'm sure there's fans of other teams that aren't in this area that are like, again, these guys, but it's like, why? Why are the Rangers on national television so many times?
Mm.
Because people are watching.
Yep.
People love the Rangers. There's a huge following. So, you know, good on the NHL for recognizing that and trying to make a profit, which is ultimately their business. And it's great for Rangers fans and for the players, these opportunities that come up for you as a players, it's remarkable. And I got a lot of them myself. It's tons of great memories that we still talk about when we're at holidays or whatever with my family.
I'm just wondering if ensuring that the Rangers and Islanders didn't see each other for an entire
Yeah.
calendar year
Ridiculous.
was intentional. In the lead up to this, if you want to talk about build up, you want to talk about anticipation, and maybe that was their plan all along. Maybe that was exactly how they drew it up, but I feel like that game just showed, and I know it was definitely more built up because of the setting and everything like that, but what a crime it was that was the first time that they had seen each other in 423 days. I just think that's just ridiculous. I mean, it should have been better. It could have been even better build up. That could have been like the third time that Sorokin and Shesterkin are going head to head. That could have been like, I don't know, Martin and Goudreau dropped the gloves like, weeks ago, and then they're meeting again and Rempe steps in, and that wasn't even, it could have been even bigger than it was, but because it was more anticipation of the fact that these guys haven't seen each other in so long, I just feel like it was a missed opportunity in that way. And I mean, I don't know the logistics of the scheduling office and how that all works, but I just think that just can't happen again. How does that happen? Like,
It does.
Well,
I mean, yeah, go ahead, Brian.
no, it's those are so complicated, those schedules.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Field it.
called from Hartford. So it's for either Panarin or who did you say, Molly?
Jimmy VC.
East.
They
So
both were
yeah.
day to day with lower body injuries. They didn't practice after the Stars game. So it is a precautionary move for the Rangers right now. If one or either or can't go, they also have Alex Belzile up and in the cupboard, if you will. Waiting in the wings, I think is a better way to say it. But yeah, it's they really, I think they've made 12 recalls
Mm.
this season, including Johnny Brodzinski, who has become a regular.
Mhm.
Congrats to
It's
him.
Yep.
Yeah, also congrats to Stick Saps for him. Just so well deserved. I mean, he's been such an important guy for them for so long. And he earns that deal. It's a one-way deal, which is something that he's been working for his entire career. And it was a great deal for the Rangers as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at what their bottom six is going to look like for the next couple seasons, it's affordable
Yep.
and it's formidable between
Mhm.
him and Jimmy VC and, the guys that they have, Barclay Goodrow as well. But yeah, they've made 12 recalls this season, which they have dealt with injuries more than they have in a really long time. I mean, they were so lucky for so many years, and this season they definitely got the treatment of every other NHL team. But I do find it interesting how they've capitalized on carrying the extra forward, carrying the extra defenseman, because Laviolette has wanted to take a look. Because I also think that, I mean, this is me just speculating, but I think that, I mean, Will Cooley was told that he was expected to compete for a spot, a roster spot this season. But I just had a feeling that Laviolette looked at Cooley because he's been high on Cooley for the entire season and thought, how has this kid not been up here beforehand? Like, how is this the first time that I'm, bringing him on the roster? And I feel like he's wanted to, and same thing with Edstrom. He saw Edstrom and was like, why is this kid buried in Hartford? I want him on my roster. So I feel like they've given him a time to look at all the guys that they have in the cupboard and, given Laviolette an opportunity to make his own evaluations. And that's why we've seen so many different guys come up at different times this season.
I like that it's Othmann again. I think it's good to have a close eye, bring him back in, even if he's not going to play. It's like, hey, you're on our radar. We're not forgetting about you.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, it's kind of we're recognizing what you're doing, sort of thing, almost like a reward. And that's, who knows what's going to happen, but he's bright future.
Right.
That's but hopefully he's not needed.
Yeah, and for a kid like that to see guys like Matt Rempe and especially Rempe, we talk about this a little later in the show with Larry, but he was just such a unique guy when they first drafted him. It was almost like he's 6'8.5. Why not? Like, let's just see what we can do with him. Let's just see what he could become, what the possibilities of it. But when he first was drafted, he was so far away. He was no Othmann, he was just so down far on the depth chart, but he's gotten better every year. They've worked with him very closely every year. But I remember watching him for the first time and just he was, at least he's not so much anymore, but just like a lumbering, gazelle on skates or giraffe on skates is probably a better comparison. But now he has so much more control of his body. He's so much better in that regard. And it's because they've worked with him. And this season in Hartford, he's shown up on the score sheet. He's just been much more noticeable, had more impact on games than he ever has before. And that's what's led to him coming up. Like that's, it's been a natural progression for him, but it's just, he has come so far from where he first started in the organization. And I think it's such a unique story where he's concerned.
I talked to Jeff Bukaboom about him a couple of years ago at an alumni event. And he said, we like this guy. We want him to be kind of like what you were. I was like, all right. I didn't know who he was. And I looked him up. I was like, well, I mean, I was a 2-time All-American. I had 30 goals in the American League. What are we talking about here? But
dust that dirt off your shoulder, Brian. Humble brag.
No. People forget.
Oh,
like
yes, yes, yes.
I like to remind him.
Good, as you should.
Rookie year in the American League, 30 goals.
Spit those stats. Spit them out. I will say, talking to Matt Rempe, he told me that Tanner Glass has always been in his corner, has always been a proponent of Matt Rempe. And I think that's really interesting. I think
Well,
that Tanner Glass's voice definitely carries, and I just think it's an interesting dynamic there.
yeah, and to get to my actual point, other than pumping my own tires, it's I couldn't be that in the NHL. I wanted to be that, and I thought I could be, but I wasn't going to be like a 30-30 guy in the NHL, and I had to learn a new way to play. And he is kind of crafting his way of playing where you can't like it if you make a mistake or if your skating isn't getting better, you stick out like a little deficiency in a 6'8" man looks a lot worse than it does
6'8" and a
in
half is you're
yeah
standing out no matter
in a
what.
5'11" guy. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, eyeballs are on you.
Yeah.
That's what I assume that all the time when I played, and it's just little things turn into bigger things. So you really have to be diligent and disciplined and play a certain way, because then if you're effective enough with that, just the sheer size, he can create and do that. You can bring him up regardless of what he's done in junior, regardless of what his numbers say. Like, he's 21. You got to think of him almost as like a 16-year-old right now because of how much he's grown. And you look at him, yeah, he's tall, but he looks like a baby.
He does.
He's young.
He's 21. He's 21.
Right. So I'm really interested and excited to see what he can become, because you can work on your hands, you can work on your shot, and you can work on your skating. People think you're a finished product 21. At 25 years old, I had to break down and forget how to skate and learn a whole new way of skating. Otherwise, I was out of the league. I'd played like 110 games to that point, and I went all summer, and then like over 700 games later, I got to play eight whatever it was, because you adapt. So if he has that in him, that ability to want to do that, this guy could be a garden favorite for a lot of years.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's sitting on 96 penalty minutes in the AHL this season. 96.
That was nothing when I played in the AHL.
Oh, well, it is now. It is now. But the guy can fight. The guy isn't scared of any of those situations. I mean, how could you be towering over everybody else? But he also, and I mentioned this later too, but he's putting in the work, and they're putting in the work with him. He's out there with the extras, and Edstrom too, out there with the extras every single day after practice, after morning skate, working with the skills coach, working with the assistants, spending extra time, because he knows and they know that he's still a work in progress. So if he's able to continue putting in the work, I'm excited. It could be fun. It could be a lot of fun, especially just because of his dimensions alone.
It could be a lot of fun, and I don't think anyone's ever a finished product at 21 years old. I can only imagine, doing that kind of stuff. So, all right, we're going to get into some more trade rumors, discussion, roster moves with Larry Brooks. It's coming up next on the podcast right here. Back on the podcast here, and it's time to welcome in, of course, the great Larry Brooks from the New York Post. Larry, we're discussing all things Rangers. They're streaking. We're going into another big game tonight to try to keep that streak alive. But of course, there are still some things the Rangers need to fix, work on. And thankfully, there's a deadline coming up soon, the NHL trade deadline, where we're hoping they're going to be a little bit active. As of right now, obviously, there's some injuries they need to make up for. What are you feeling? Who are you thinking could be a big target for the Rangers, or at least someone that you feel could help them if they were to go out and get before that deadline?
Well, I think their needs are right now what they've been all year, really. They're looking for a right wing to play with Zibanejad and Kreider, and I think they're looking for an upgrade on their third line center. I would prefer them to have a stronger third pair left D, but I don't know if they're going to replace Gustafsson. He's just played so well for them in his role, and we know Laviolette,
Big
endorses him.
fan.
Yeah,
Big fan.
He's a big fan.
Big fan.
Every time he's asked about Gus, he says, "Well, Gus and I have history."
He glows. He
He
glows.
does. So look, I think it's the center spot on the third line. We know, Brodzinski is a good story. I think they'd like to upgrade with a little bit more experience, with a little guy, with somebody who's maybe has a little more fiber between Cooley and Kako. It's becoming a really interesting dynamic on the third line. They have a third line that can score.
Mhm.
And that's why, deviating from the trade deadline for a second, that's why I would leave Kako on that line. I wouldn't move him up. They have three lines right now. Kreider and Zibanejad take care of themselves pretty much at this point. VC's up there, but Laviolette, moves up Panarin, he moves up Trocheck. So VC's not playing up there in a tight third period if they're behind. So I think they're looking for an upgraded center. I think one of the people, and I wrote about this the other day, is Seattle's Alex Wennberg, who really would be playing down in a third line role for the Rangers. He skates well. He's got some size. He's got a lot of experience. I think I think he brings more to the table than Brodzinski at this point, though I really do like Brodzinski's shoot first mentality and his speed. So I think they're looking there to upgrade in that spot, and I think they're searching for the right wing to play with Zibanejad and Kreider. I always think they do better with speed on that side. So I would like a guy with speed to play with them, but there are several alternatives out there. I don't think any of them are worth giving up a first round draft pick, though. And guys on that side, I just don't see difference makers. I don't think there's a particular difference maker here. I think it's going to be really interesting what the cost is for certain assets. I think that'll be the determining factor who the Rangers get. But I expect them to be very aggressive. They've put themselves in position now where legitimately they can say we're one of the 6 or 8 teams that have the best chance at winning the cup.
Mm-hmm.
They're like this latest streak has reestablished them as one of the better teams in the league. There's no dynasty teams or no super teams in this league. So the Rangers, flawed as they may be, and we see their flaws every night. We don't see every other team's flaws every night. We see the Ranger flaws every night. But there's no question, through 56 games, they've established themselves as one of the favorites to win the cup.
Hypothetically speaking here, if Drury is looking at Seattle as a one-stop shop, potentially, I'm looking at Jordan Eberle. I don't know about you guys. I'm wondering what you're thinking, but Jordan Eberle, I think, just from watching him with the Islanders, and we kind of got into this off camera a little bit, he wasn't really set up for success with the style that the Islanders play and the skill set that he can bring. I don't really feel like it was really able to shine in the circumstances he was in with the Islanders. Just that's from what I watched him up close. So I'm thinking that he could be a right wing option for the Rangers. What are your thoughts?
I like him. I mean, I really like him. I've liked him the last couple playoffs because I think he's a guy, like I talked about, he can get into the middle of the ice. And I was really surprised by that. I didn't think that was his game, and he really can do that. And when you do that, he creates so much in terms of confusion. He gets between the dots through the neutral zone and off the rush. And that's kind of the game that the Rangers play. Now, if I'm Chris Drury, am I looking at, okay, what's our game and what complements us? Or am I looking at Florida and being like, how are we going to beat Florida?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no dynasty teams, and Larry, you're right, but if Vegas gets healthy, I mean, I think they're coming out of the West, even though you have Dallas, who's really, really good. Edmonton has been, very good lately. You have a couple of Colorado is. I watched Colorado Vancouver after the Rangers game 2 nights ago, and they were both teams playing at a different speed.
Colorado's ridiculous.
What is going on? And it was like a 2-1 game. So do you look at the other teams? How am I going to come out of the East? Who do we have to beat and try to combat that? Is that who you're looking at?
Well,
or are you trying
to
complement your own roster, or is it a
you know what I
combination?
think? Yeah, what I think is that, and it's been interesting to hear Laviolette over the last week talk so much about their marquee guys, and it's, he's talking about, well, these are our power play guys. We're going back to the power play because they're our guys. And then on Sunday in the Stadium series against the Islanders, he kept throwing them out, throwing them out, double shifting, and then they have the power plays. And so the Rangers are going to win on they're going to win or lose based on their marquee players. They just are. So they have to bolster them the best way they can, I think. Is Artemi Panarin going to have a breakout playoffs? They need him to have a break. He's their best player.
Yeah.
He has to be he has to be one of their 2 or 3 best players in the playoffs too. Mika Zibanejad has to be one of their best players. And so I think they can solidify everything else around them. But and as much as I have been talking all year about them bulking up, well, they kind of are with Rempe and Edstrom now. And I think it's an indication that they recognize that they lacked some size and they lacked, they lacked that physicality. So, are these two, is Matt Rempe, can he
that's,
I don't know.
that's the question.
They're certainly giving him the opportunity. So I just think, I don't think they can become a Florida team. They're going to have to win on their talent, but they're also going to have to back it up with the grind and the grit and getting to the inside and everything else. But, they're kind of married to who they are. They are. It's not as if they're going to flip, Zibanejad at the deadline and then bring in a different kind of player. This is who they are.
I don't think I'm saying anything groundbreaking when I say that when they do bring in the 2 to 3 reinforcements that they are going to bring in, that Rempe is going to get edged out. And I can see him filling a really niche role of a 13th forward, where when they do feel like they need somebody to come in and answer the bell or, start something, that I think Laviolette is the type of coach that would utilize that too. But I don't think Matt Rempe is going to be in the Rangers playoff lineup. It's just, and I give him so much credit. I give the Rangers a lot of credit. Every single day, the assistant coaches and the skills coach, Christian Humera, is out there with Edstrom and Rempe putting in extra work. Like, they know that these guys are still works in progress. They know that these guys still need a little bit extra work if they are going to fill this role between now and when these reinforcements do arrive. But there's just, we've talked about this, Larry. There's just, I don't think that Rempe is in there, is on their fourth line come the playoffs.
I watched him break a puck out behind his own net, skate it all the way down the ice and dump it in and run somebody.
It's
north,
entertaining.
North, south, he can move.
Yeah.
And if he can play shorter minutes effectively, that's sort of a skill. And I always have a soft spot for that, because you think, oh, he's only playing 6 minutes or whatever it is. If you can be effective in those 6 minutes, it's a hard thing to do. A lot of guys can't. It's hard to sit there for that long and then go. And for a big man to do it, I saw that happen in I think it was, I don't know what period it was in, but he just took it. There was a little scrum. He scooped it up behind the net himself. The confidence he had to skate it all the way down the ice, and then he put it in the corner.
It was a second period.
Him and Edstrom combined.
Yeah, it was
Bash Brothers.
Early in a playoff series, you're putting that in to try to establish a certain, a certain game plan. So he can be used. I wouldn't shock me at all, because you do different things. You tinker. You know what coaches do. It's it's the same every year, and it's the same every year for a reason, because the same type of play wins every single year in the playoffs. Now, if their power play's cooking, they have a great chance. It's feast or famine.
Colorado
bit.
probably won it. Colorado probably won it a little bit differently.
Yeah,
Right?
but they're
Don't
in
you
your
think?
face too. They're
Yeah.
still in your face. They
They're
still
still, yes, it's true, but they
can't
were,
get near their net.
yeah,
They had the puck. They were just like a super team, but they
yeah.
still, like, it's Landeskog. He's not a, he's not some guy that's going to get pushed around. And even McKinnon, he's their skill guys have a lot of grit to them. They weren't necessarily like Vegas last year with all the redwood trees and no one could get near the net, but they were good enough.
You have to take into consideration, though, that that line in particular has been playing pretty sheltered minutes.
Right,
Laviolette's not throwing those guys out there.
Well,
And
again, I mean, it's really interesting again how much he is leaning on his top
yeah,
players.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think it's fair to say that he identified these last couple of weeks as a particularly important stretch. They were kind of teetering coming out of the break. There's no question about that. And I think I think he recognized the importance of reestablishing themselves, and you watch him work the bench, and he would play Artemi Panarin 40
yeah.
honestly, and Artemi would play 45 minutes if he could too. But when you watch him, double shift Panarin and then move Trocheck up to right wing and then move Kako for one shift. But he wants Kreider and Zibanejad and Panarin and Lafreniere on the ice as often as possible. And one of the, I think, unfortunate byproducts of that is that Will Cooley's not getting enough ice time. I look at Will Cooley's ice time, and he's getting. There are periods where he's on like for 2.5 to 3.5 minutes. I just don't think he's getting enough ice time, and it's not because he's young. He needs time. He needs this. It's because he's producing. Because he is. He goes to the net. He plays straight line. He plays playoff hockey. So I want to see him. I don't know why he's not on the second power play. I really I haven't understood that for a while, but now that Wheeler went down, he's gone now with 3 and 2. He's gone with the 3 forwards, and he's put Trouba back. With Gustafsson instead of going with 4 forwards and going with Cooley. I would like to see Cooley the net front guy on the second power play. But again, Peter Laviolette is a guy who rides his horses, and and that's what he's doing. Whether they can strengthen themselves and get deep enough that he trusts the third line to play 11 minutes of 5-on-5 is something I need that they're going. I think it's going to be beneficial for them because you can't get through the playoffs with 5 players. You can't.
Gallant was similar, though, no? In terms of riding his horses?
Yeah, he was to a certain extent.
Yeah, I feel like that's just the makeup of this team.
Yeah.
We've been saying
except when he had the kid line, he was able to actually
right.
And
he was almost reluctant about that.
I always thought that when people, I really did. I mean, I got the whole argument about Lafreniere as a first overall pick should probably be in a more prominent role. I think that's, you can debate that here and there, but I never bought the fact that they stuck him on the third line or that they stuck Kako on the third line. It was kind of a niche third line. Right. It was, they were the kids, they're the kid line, and they played well with each other. And a lot of times they were getting second line ice time. So, when the kids were together and they were going, then they could roll their 3.
What I'm kind of curious about, and you guys brought up Lavs. We saw in the Stadium series, he was uber aggressive towards the end of that game, throwing out or taking off Igor to put it on the 6-on-4 power play and then to go make it a 6-on-5. Is that something that And again, you mentioned it that the Rangers were kind of reeling coming out of the
All-Star
All-Star
break.
break. But do you think that that aggressive mind style is something that you may see him continue to roll with down the stretch here, trying to get the most out of his guys?
That's
I think he's been
situational.
aggressive. I think he's been aggressive all year, so I
Yeah.
wouldn't expect it to change much.
It's situational too. You know, multiple goals. Trying to win a game like that game's different. It's not a regular season game. There's a big spectacle. There's a lot of eyes on it. You know, so you try to almost look at that like this is a little dress rehearsal for what a playoff situation might be.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? Because you're outside and you're only outside for that one game. You want to win that one game, and it's sort of like everything's kind of heightened, all the emotions heightened, and there's more to it than just 2 points on the line. So it's like, all right, these are some reps that we would have if we're down in a playoff game. That was like that's what you'll see. Like we're trying to win this game no matter what. We're not worried about any other game. This game's all that matters right now.
And my God, when that power play plays with urgency,
Yeah.
my God, everybody look out. Like that's the type of aggression and style that they need to channel for the entire duration of the playoffs. The urgency that they played with in this, the final stretch of that game, that's what's going to carry them through the playoffs. But it's just a matter of sustaining that, which is difficult to do. And, obviously that's a challenge in itself, but that was it right there. I mean, when they were whipping the puck around during that, I know they have the 2-man advantage and whatnot, but it was a thing of beauty. It really was. And that's an unstoppable sort of force that they have going on there that I think Ranger fans should be really excited about and should look at that and think that if they play with that sort of intensity and that tenacity, they could actually make some noise in the playoffs. But only if they play with that.
Well, I mean, even look at those power plays. They executed. They won draws. They got to the middle. They shot from the middle. They scored from the middle. Okay, they do it again. There's net front. There's lanes in the middle. Then what do the Islanders do? All right, we're going to clog up the middle and then bank right over to Mika for, off the dot. So they have options if they do the things that, like that's how you set it up. You want that shot from the middle. If you want to pass it around the perimeter on your first unit, everybody touches the puck. That's fine, but it doesn't always work so well. It looks cool a lot of times, but this was like, all right, we got to attack, and they know that they can. And when they attack, they're going to get chances. They got a good guy in front, knows what to do.
You know what's interesting too? It reminded me of the last few games, how important winning the opening faceoff is on the power play. Because
it's huge.
they were because the first 50% of the year they were constantly winning. They're always in the zone. Then when they were going through this stretch, they'd lose draws. They'd go back and they'd pick it up. They couldn't. It was tough it was tough on the entry. Teams were pressuring them on the blue line, and then they'd go back again. And it's just when they can establish possession right off the hop, they're almost impossible to contain. But when they have to go back and like any other team, I guess, but when they have to go back and restart, it goes nowhere. And their power plays that go nowhere because they stay on the ice. They stay on the ice, they move it, they move
well, that's
it.
why you got 2D on the second unit, because they're playing 20 seconds and someone's coming out of the box.
Yeah.
I meant to tell you that too, because it's just they're not
gonna... actually the other night he actually put the second unit on for an offensive zone draw with a minute 2.
Yeah, I saw that.
Because they were, it was like
big time minutes.
Get off, get these guys off. And they did. They came off. They came off.
The unit had like the last 25 though, because there was a whistle, and they're like, "All right, get the big guns back up."
Yeah, right. No, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
They did.
But I'm with Larry. I think that's Laviolette's coaching style. I think that we've seen that all season from him in terms of, end of game situations and the way that he approaches it. He's aggressive. He's a in-game aggressive coaching coach.
Well, if you're paying a guy 11 million,
get him on. I got a question for you.
Yeah.
How much did you, guys pay attention to how the coach interacts with the media? How much attention do you pay to what the coach says on a daily basis?
Every year I paid a little bit more attention to it
Hmm.
because it's information for the players. What does he think about this team? So, for example, my last year in Pittsburgh, my son had the app on his iPad, and he would watch the post game in the morning, and I'd call him in the morning as I was in Pitt and he was here. But we'd talk about the game, and he was telling me things that Coach Sullivan said, and I was like, okay. I'll never forget one time he's like, Dad, you were -1. And I was like, he goes, Coach did not like that goal. And I'm like, he didn't. He goes, nope, he did not like that goal. And I hope he can play next game. And I was like, okay. Went to practice. I wasn't in the lineup for the next game. I ended up 3. And he was like devastated. I called him before a game from the gym. We had to, you work out when you're not playing. And he's like, I knew that minus was gonna come back and hurt us, Dad. And I'm like, you did. You called it. And he goes, I watched Coach Sullivan. I was like, how did you? He's 6 years old at the time. I was like, how did you know that? He's like, Coach Sullivan, he didn't like that goal. So you can kind of know what you're going to walk into. You don't want to be surprised at practice, but and a lot of times, I mean, the coach is going to say a lot more to the players, and really good coaches communicate very well to the players. Like, and Lavi was one, and Sully was another. He's not hiding anything, and he's not going to tell you great job and then go in the media and say, our penalty kill was awful. Well, I'm on the penalty kill. Like, what are you telling me? Great job. So he like those guys are good, and I would pay attention to that more and more just because it's my job. I want to know what he's saying. I want to know all the information I can have.
Well, Lobs does a good job of communicating, and his press conferences are always usually pretty good. So always worth watching if you're a Ranger fan to get those inside information so you're not getting it from your child or someone else like Brian used to.
He was right.
And he was right. Larry, we always appreciate you coming on. Thanks as always.
Thanks, guys.
And now here's your boiling point for the week. And now it's time for the boiling point of the week. Brian, what's boiling your point?
Landing on an airplane this last Monday, coming back from a hockey tournament for my 8-year-old. We went to Florida. It was awesome. There's no connecting flights. There's no one's getting on another plane. We got in at like 10 o'clock at night. Someone from the back just decides they're going to go right to the front. When you sit back there and you wait your turn. All right, don't be an ass. What do we do? Like, what? How do people think? Like, I'm just gonna go. They don't think for a second that like everybody wants to get off the plane. Don't go from the back all the way to the front. Like, we don't care. They're like bumping into people too. Just a complete jabroni. Anyways, have some common courtesy, you donkeys. That's it. Quick and short. Painful, painless, whatever you want to call it. I was not happy about it, and then I had to pretend I like didn't notice it because my kids were looking at me because I was like, "What?" And I'm mumbling under my breath. There were my 2 oldest kids, and they're looking at me like, "Why is that person going?" And I had to tell them that person is selfish and probably doesn't have any friends.
And that'll put a bow on episode 145 of the Up in the Blue Seats podcast from the New York Post. Before we get out of here, we're going to dish out some stars. Let's start with you, Molly. Ladies first this week. Who's your number 1 star?
I got to go with Matt Rempe for a myriad of reasons. Just becoming the first player in NHL history to make his debut in an outdoor game should get it for him enough. But the fact that he came in, dropped the gloves with Matt Martin, he played little less than 4.5 minutes in that one, but still made an impact. Played against the Stars, absolute bash brother action with Adam Edstrom. Just really, really fun to watch this. And I do believe that the Stadium Series game was the 6-year anniversary of the passing of his father too. So just an unbelievable story all around. So stick taps for Matt Rempe for sure.
Boiler, number 2 star.
I got Capo Caco. I loved his game against Dallas. Obviously, he had the goal, but then after the goal, he goes and does what not a ton of guys up front do, and he grinds. He had a cycle shift where he's below the dots, he's below the goal line, and I think just that's so important. He just looks more comfortable on the ice. He looks like he is becoming what he knows he can be, and the goal he had was on enough to stick quickly. Short side coming down his strong side. His game took off after that. They drew a penalty later. He was, he's an element that they need, and he's really, really important to the team. And I think the players, the coaches, they know that. Hopefully, the fans start understanding that too. He is an element that, especially, I mean, I look at it like playoffs. That's a type of player that's going to be really effective in the playoffs.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I'm going to give the number 3 star to the New York Rangers in general. 5-0-0 all
way to go out on
time
a limb there.
in outdoor games. Listen, but they were also the first team ever in the outdoor game to complete a 3-goal comeback. That's impressive. And like you said, like that's essentially a playoff game, if you will. So give kudos to the Rangers for coming back, even though the Islanders are not very good. But we will take that win. We'll take that. And we'll take this podcast home here. As always, we're going to thank Jake Brown for helping produce the show. You can catch up on all episodes of the podcast by subscribing to Up in the Blue Seats on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching us right now on the New York Post Sports YouTube page, be sure to give us a thumbs up, comment below. What do you think the Rangers will do at the trade deadline? Do you think they're going to go all in? Do you think they're going to do something crazy? One-stop shop? I don't know. Give us your thoughts, and maybe we'll read them on the podcast next week. You can follow us on Twitter at Miss Mollie Walker. That's 2 E's, 2 R's, at BryBrows22, and myself at Andrew Harts without the E. For Brian Boyle, Mollie Walker, Larry Brooks, I'm Andrew Harts. Thanks as always for listening to the podcast. We'll talk to you next week. LGR. Later.